To order. Our first order of business is approval of the minutes.
Let's call the order.
Mr. Chairman, I move the minutes be approved. These are the minutes from April 15.
That is due to the lack of no meetings for May and June.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I abstain.
Okay. One abstention. Okay, so motion passes. Our first order of business is BOA 19.06.
06, here we are.
And Chairman, board members, good afternoon. So the first case I have before you, as the Chairman mentioned, BOA 19.06. This is a variance request for 103 Blakely Avenue. If you'll see on your in your packet and on your monitors, 103 Blakely Avenue. This is a front setback variance request. The property owner is shown above, and you notice its general location. The subject property is shown in the crosshatched area on your map right there with the PPIN identified. It's approximately 1/4 acre. And this, both the subject property as well as the surrounding area is zoned R2 medium density single family residential. I have an aerial image for you right there to identify the existing property and to better identify it in accordance with the adjacent properties. And you see the various streets surrounding the subject property. And we're recommending denial for reasons that we'll explain in the subsequent slides. And so the image you see on the left of your screen, this is an excerpt from the submission given to us by the applicant. And you'll notice that the site plan included, this is the site plan included with the application. The proposed structure of about 2,544 square feet is outlined in yellow, as you see at the left. And then, as we talked about, that is within the R2 zoning district. The subject property does not meet the required lot width along the right-of-way for R2 zoning. But you'll see on a subsequent slide that the subject property is of sufficient size for R2 zoning and actually exceeds that requirement. And you'll notice here, we'll reference back to this drawing as necessary. I've drawn in the 35-foot front and rear setback lines on here. And board members, that is drawn to a relatively correct scale. Was able to scale this drawing as best as possible, and I believe what you see right there is an accurate representation. You'll also notice an excerpt of the zoning chart right there at the bottom. And as we said, this requests a front setback variance, and its request is to reduce the front setback reduce it to 20 to 25 feet in lieu of the required 35 feet. And board members, the drawing here, what I want to show you, what I'm depicting here on your left, again, the 35-foot front and rear setbacks, which are required by R2 zoning, are shown. And then the available lot coverage is shown in the orange color there on your left. And then you'll notice on the right, again, the setbacks drawn in. The requested lot coverage of the desired principal structure is shown in the light blue. Now, what we've done with this drawing, again, to as accurate scale as we can, utilizing these drawings, we've taken the desired lot coverage and then moved it over and placed it on the available lot coverage, again, within the setback lines shown to as close to the accurate scale as we can get. So the proposed structure's lot coverage fits within the existing setbacks without a setback variance. Further, the required rear yard is accomplished on subject property without a setback variance. The rear yard width, which is approximately 80 feet wide, occurs throughout the 35-foot wide rear setback and is in compliance with R2 zoning as a result. As we mentioned earlier, here's the exact figure. The existing lot area is 11,055 square feet, which exceeds the requirements of R2 zoning. R2 zoning requires a minimum lot size of 10,500 square feet. Additional lot coverage is available within the 35-foot setbacks, as you'll notice on the drawing above left right there. Again, additional lot coverage is available within the setbacks, which is above and beyond the requested lot coverage of the desired principal structure. So the staff recommendation recommends the board deny the request for front setback variance based upon the information submitted in the request. The required rear yard may be obtained without a variance. The applicant is advised that the applicant may conduct a professional survey as allowable in the section of the zoning ordinance written on your screen, that a request for an administrative front setback adjustment could be contemplated by staff depending upon the results of the survey. So if this action is denied by this board, there is an administrative process the applicant can go through. Chairman, board members, I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to answer questions on behalf of staff before we turn it over to the applicant.
Mr. Chairman, so you're advising, is that where we are taking the front, the dimension of the front lots and averaging them to see if this sticks out farther than the others? Okay.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. And so for those who did not see me nodding, that is correct. There is a provision, to elaborate just a bit on Article 7, Section D3, there's a provision where that if the averages allow it, then the structure can be aligned with the structures on either side. And that would certainly be available to the applicant if they wish to pursue that route, irregardless of what we're doing here today.
So is that the case for this property? There's properties that are closer to the 35-foot setback?
So, Chairman, yes, the answer is yes. Now, those setbacks may not necessarily be front setbacks, but however, I did have a conversation with the applicant that if the applicant did wish to endeavor to make that survey, that I advised the applicant they would be welcome to reflect all setbacks of all structures around it, and I would give it a full evaluation.
What is his, what is his reason to want a non-compliance?
So, board members, and I'll allow the applicant to articulate it better for the board, but I'll summarize that the desire is to have greater rear yard area is the request of the applicant, and the gentleman can describe it probably describe it in much greater detail and more eloquently than I.
Well, isn't there also a building on the back of this lot?
So, Chairman, board members, certainly I think this application contemplates a future demolition of the existing structure prior to constructing a new structure. I think that's a safe assumption. But yes, sir, if you'll notice, there is an existing structure, and you can see in the aerial image on your screen right now. And I think probably, and the applicant can clarify for us, but I think the desire was to determine if this variance could be approved prior to taking any action on demolishing an existing building and trying to build a new structure.
I guess the only question I'd like to ask the owner is, does he plan on living in that building while he's building the other one? Is that the?
Yes, sir. So I'll defer that to the applicant, board members, unless you have any more questions for me as staff.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.
This time we'll ask the applicant to come up and please state your name for us.
You are welcome
Is it here or there?
right here, and that
Oh,
reverses.
that's okay, I'm not gonna need that,
Okay.
thanks. Hey, Dick, do you remember me?
Yeah,
I just wondered if you,
how are you?
good. I'll be quick. I made notes, so I don't want to miss anything. I purchased this property in 2005. My dream then and still is to build a nice Fairhope-style cottage on the property. Unfortunately, right after I bought it, we had the real estate collapse, and I've been sort of digging my way out of that ever since. But I'm still hoping to do that. In the meantime, I've been renting it and losing tons of money every year. But as you can see, I mean, the lot is non-conforming because back in the 50s, and this is what I've been told, and I think it's true, the lot next to me on Bayview, he owned both lots. And in fact, he built the little structure I have now, the little house there, was built for his daughter. At some point after that, I guess he decided to take a chunk out of this lot, and so now it's only, like you should see, 58 feet wide on the front part. Of course, I knew that when I bought it, so that wasn't an issue. But when I did buy it, I met with city planning about this, about all the setbacks, including the front setbacks. And at that time, I was given this copy from Article 3 with and it was even highlighted that in the case of an existing adjacent establishment, the setback would be the average within 100 feet of either side of the proposed structure. So I was told then that because, well, if there were houses next to me, I could take the average, as my front setback. And I'm sure that rule is made because that's what looks best. I mean, the spirit of the rule is to line up houses on the street. That's my main reason for doing this. A greater backyard would be great, but I want it to look the best from, on the street. And for Fairhope and for the lot, the best thing is to build even. And that's why I'm asking to move the setback up really to 25 feet. It would be about the average from the two. One's 20, one's about 28 or so. Now I'm being told that, well, that rule only applied if the two houses next to you, it was also their front setbacks. And it's not really shown here, but the two houses next to me, I'm the only one on Blakeney on that side of the street. The one house next to me is on Bayview. The other house next to me is on Summit. So it's their side setbacks. So I was told, well, because of that, I'd have to get a variance in order to move up. Mr. King has done a great job showing that, I knew I could build a house on the lot. That really wasn't a question to me. I'm doing this because I think it'd be best for the house, for the lot, and for the street if I was lined up with the houses next to me. The new house next to me, which is on Summit, well, first of all, it's a two-story. It's 20 feet off Blakeney, and he's got a two-story garage that literally is 5 feet from my property, from the front of my property. If I build behind that, it's just going to look terrible. I think y'all would agree with that. In addition, that house, and I talked to Mr. King about this, that house, he put the front elevation and the front door is on Blakeney. So it looks like, he's a Blakeney house at 20 feet off the setback. Anyway, that's what he's allowed to do. And Mr. King, he did suggest to me about doing, hiring a surveyor to survey all the lots, which I can't afford, but I did do my own survey, which I know you could say, well, it's not professional, but it's very easy to measure approximately the setbacks of the houses in that area. And I went through actually for 3 blocks, and I don't know if I can enter this into evidence, but because I made copies for everybody, but I basically marked every house in a 3-block area of my neighborhood of mine that has a less than 35-foot setback in the front. And again, I may be off a foot or two, but some of these houses are 21 feet. There's some of them are 25 feet. So, I mean, even if I'm a little off, it's obvious almost half these houses have front variances less than 35. And And again, I can leave this with y'all so that's really about it. I did notice too, there's a house being built right across the street from me that's on the corner of Summit and Blakeney right now. It's being built, so it was easy to measure it because it has all the stakes. Actually, there's a few houses that still had stakes to measure, the exact setbacks. And this particular house is, it's almost like he's flipped. The permit says he's 309 Summit, but he's 20 feet off Summit and 35 feet off Blakeney. So maybe he might have got a variance or something. I don't understand it. But anyway, that's just another example of a house. He's one of them. That's really if his true address is Summit, he's only 20 feet off, and he's building right now. So anyway, unless there's questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Are you going to take down the house
Oh,
behind?
yes, sir.
After you build?
Well, yes, if that's or before, if it's required, one or the other. I think the last time I talked to the city planning folks, they said that might be allowed, that I could live there while I built the other one, but I'd have to sign something that says I'd tear it down right after. The other issue, one other little quick, if I build the house all the way back, as Mr. King has showed, and I'd like to have a detached garage behind it, if I'm all the way back, if it's a double garage, which of course I'd want, half the garage would, because of the width of the lot, half the garage would be behind the house, and it would be very difficult to pull into the half of it that's behind the house, as it'd be pretty close. But anyway, I won't call that a hardship or anything, but that's it.
Is the property still for sale right now?
Well, I put it up for sale because I was losing money so badly, and but I'm in the process of refinancing my loan on it, so I don't plan to sell it. I hope to build on it. So, but I still have it listed. Yeah. All right. Thank you all for your
Seems
consideration.
reasonable to me.
Can I just ask when a decision would be made, or when I would find out? Do you-
It will be made today.
Oh, it'll be
Tonight.
tonight? They're about to vote. Oh, they're going to vote. Oh, I'll step it off.
Okay. Thank you. We'll open this to the public portion. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak for or against this? Okay. You'll come up and state your name for us.
The name's Vance McCowan. I've not met my neighbor. Hey,
Your address, please?
351 North Summit. I would just say that part of developing and building in that neighborhood is challenging with the setbacks that are there. So when I developed and built my house, I actually have 8,000 square feet, which is 2/10 of an acre. This is 11,000 feet. The garage that was mentioned that was allowed is actually 35 feet back from the right-of-way, the garage he's referring to. And in other words, my garage is not 20 feet from the right-of-way where his house would have to be behind it. Mm-hmm. And the principal house is actually, which is my rear setback, is 35 feet from the adjoining property line, which means that it's not crowding and I appreciate the setback request. And the reason I moved my garage back was so that my garage would be in the line of where his proposed, where I understood the setback would be to 35. So that line is would be the front setback. The challenges within that neighborhood across the street, I think what he's referring to, that lot is actually fronting on Blakeney, whether the address is Summit, but that lot fronts Blakeney, so the front setback is 35 feet on Blakeney, happens to be a 20-foot side setback on Summit, so that is within compliance. There was no variance on the lot, on the house being built right now. I would just say that it is and always has been a difficult, because that's just part of the golden rule of these setbacks that are here. And so my lot actually, I think, went to the Supreme Court years ago trying to modify the setback, and it didn't change for a reason, I suppose. But I think a uniform line would be from my garage to the neighbor next door. The neighbor next door's house that fronts on Bayview is a side setback, but it's farther than 35 feet off of Blakeney. So if you,
That's not true. I measured it, it's 28 feet off Blakeney on the side.
the large house?
The house
on the
next,
corner of
the
that-
house on Bayview that you see right there, and you can see it's closer to Blakeney than your garage. It's in between where your garage and your house are.
I'm
So-
looking at this photograph.
Please speak into the microphone. The recording, your comments won't be captured in the recording.
Oh, I can see it
And
here, excuse me.
yes, sir.
If I look at this roof and look at the garage, you can see that my garage and that house are about 35 feet from the property line. You see this?
Well, I measured it.
It's on this side that he's talking about. Buford, there wasn't a variance request for that corner, new construction, is there? Or was
No.
there?
So, board members, I do not recall, but I cannot sit here and tell you because that was a function of a routine building permit. But what I can tell you is that due to the definition of a lot frontage, so the definition of a lot frontage is the narrowest dimension that falls upon a right-of-way. So technically, the lot immediately east of subject property, its eastern lot line is technically its lot frontage. Now, the zoning ordinance does not govern building orientation. So if the building, however it's oriented, fits within the setbacks on the lot, it's acceptable. Sometimes that's advantageous to the structure, sometimes it's disadvantageous to the structure. So the existing structure east of subject property is properly located on the lot in
And-
terms of its front and side setbacks.
And what I would say about, this is the corner lot across the street, which is on the corner of Summit and Blakeney, which is the southeast corner. Their front door will be on Summit, but they're 20 feet back from Summit.
Southwest.
As opposed to putting their front door on Blakeney, which is technically the front of the lot, because it's a narrow dimension of the lot.
On your house, does it front Blakely?
Can I show you, I've got a plan that will show you that.
It looks like it fronts Blakely.
This is Summit, and that's the front door porch.
Gotcha. It's just the way the gable is.
Let me see that too, would you please?
This is Summit,
Okay.
this is Blakeney. So
Yeah.
here's the front entrance right there, this is the side. Here's the garage, which is back some 36 feet. It's not on the 20-foot setback. And this is the lot we're referring to, yes.
Hence, would you
Show
mind
us
showing?
So this is Summit, this is my 76-foot property, this is a 112-foot dimension. So this is the front, here's the front door. here.
Okay.
This is the carport garage, which is 36 feet back. Here's the 35-foot setback.
So from here to here, it's 35 feet?
20. This is my side setback to the front. House across the street.
This is Blakeney right here.
This is my- this
Yeah.
way. House across the street is a narrow lot this way with a long dimension on the Summit, so the front of it is actually Blakeney.
No, it
But
is.
their front door is gonna be over on the 20-foot setback on the Summit.
Is it? I've seen it. I know Danny.
So this would be If he were on a 35-foot setback, he would be in the same line as well, actually, my garage would still be behind that.
But your house would be in front of
But
it.
the house would be in front of it. But it would be 35, 40 feet away.
Yeah.
There's your garage right there.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, once we conclude the public hearing, I do have a brief follow-up comment,
Okay.
if you'll allow me.
Sure. Okay, well, is anybody else?
I think there
Uh,
was,
Sure.
I mean, I don't understand what his objection is. His house is still 20 feet off of Blakeney, and I'm just trying to get between him and the next-door neighbor. So I think it's irrelevant that his house is, you can see how close it is to my lot. It's actually closer than the house that's on Bayview, much closer. So it just wouldn't look good to build back, but anyway.
Okay, thank you. Buford, would you like to say something?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Have you closed the public hearing?
Oh, no, we have not yet. Is there anyone else with the public hearing that would like to speak? Okay, we'll open and close the public portion. Thank you.
And, Mr. Chairman and board members, and certainly staff completely respects the desires and intentions of the applicant, and the applicant followed the proper procedure for bringing this case before staff and before this board, and staff absolutely respects the authority, jurisdiction, and the wishes of this board. My comment is just to remind the board this is a request for variance that's before this body. Variances require demonstration of a hardship related to the size, shape, or topography of a lot. Yes, the variance process can be very conservative in interpretation of the zoning ordinance because, in essence, this board is changing a law and has the authority to do that. In the case of this property right here, the desired structure included with the application is able to be placed on the lot without the requirement for a variance. So, in light of those facts, it's understandable that staff would make the recommendation for denial because there's not sufficient evidence to demonstrate a variance. However, this board may render its own decision, and staff respects that.
Buford, I've got one question.
The question for Buford. So it seems to me that tonight we are not or should not be thinking about the professional survey or how many feet back the average lots are, because that seems to me is going to be made in a future administrative decision. It seems to me that we are tonight then only dealing with the information on the 35-foot setback, and we should not be thinking about how many feet the other houses are to this, because that, again, is going to be a decision made later on. So we should wipe that out of our minds. We're only talking about the very beginning, which is simply, should we give a 35-foot, that it should be a 35-foot, and we should we be considering that it should be closer to the street? But that the average, that's a later decision made by the administration.
Board members, Ms. Slagle is correct. Certainly, we respect those comments, and it is absolutely understandable and valid to always present supporting information that explains an application. So the discussion that we've had on that is valuable, and we certainly appreciate, but Ms. Slagle is correct. The actual consideration for this board is a variance to a front setback.
Right. And that's it.
Right. Thank you.
And that at some future point, it may be approved if the averages show that there is, support to do it. But tonight, we're not talking about
Mr.
that.
Chairman, yes, Ms. Slagle is correct. So the administrative portion, the administrative request, that can be submitted anytime.
All right.
That is clearly delineated in the zoning ordinance as an administrative review by staff. The planning director is the interpreter of the zoning ordinance, and so that procedure can be conducted anytime.
Right.
So what you're saying, Buford, is that the average rule would apply to this, even though he has adequate room? And because what's happening here is that we got 2 corner lots, with one lot being in the middle. So I don't see where the average rule would apply either.
Anecdotally, board members and chairman, I do not know, I do not believe that that provision would help this situation, but I would respectfully reserve judgment until we had an actual survey in hand so I could know for sure.
So it has to be on the same side of the road. It can't be across the street. That's what
So
you're saying.
to paraphrase the requirement, it's within the same block and within 300 feet, if memory serves correct.
Okay.
And so basically, you identify the block and also within 300 feet and survey those properties, identify their setbacks. And then staff, me, would evaluate that to determine if Article 7, Section D3 would be applicable.
So when you go across the street, it goes into a different block, basically.
Unless it's within 300 feet.
Okay.
It's thank you, very good.
200, okay.
It would seem to me
Lots of numbers to
that
remember.
driving through that neighborhood, there are so many variances to everything that should be done and should be there. It's ridiculous to debate this. If he's going to put up a building,
But
it's
every
going to be an improvement to the neighborhood and everything else. Well, does it really matter whether we're 10 feet off or 20 feet off? I mean, this is ridiculous. We're arguing over nothing. The whole code doesn't make any sense in the fruit and nut section or in that section of town. Everything else is built any damn way. This to me is silly. Let the guy build it where he wants. It ain't gonna hurt the neighborhood.
Make a recommendation, please.
Okay,
A motion.
motion.
I want to make a motion to deny case BOA 19.06.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay. We'll do a roll call vote, please.
No,
Schneider,
no,
Stankowski,
Nay.
I will not support it.
Nay.
you're not voting for the motion?
I won't support the motion, no.
Okay. Avent,
Yes.
Vera,
Yes.
Slagle.
Yes.
Motion-
Motion passes. I mean,
Motion-
fails.
Motion fails.
Fails.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood it.
So we'll need another motion. You have to have 4.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood that.
Okay.
I was turning down the request.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought you were, but I wanted to get clarification. Okay, so you are voting for the motion
Yes.
to deny?
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries, variance is denied.
Thank you. All right. Our second order of business is BOA 19.07.
Good evening, Chairman. Evening, Board. So this is BOA 19.07. It's a public hearing to consider the request of Jason and Deborah Schmidt for a special exception to allow a personal storage at 926 Nichols Avenue. On your screen on the left side, you'll see a reflection of the zoning, and on the right side, an aerial. Subject property is zoned M1 and is located just east of Highway 98 on the south side of Nickel Street. The applicant's requesting a special exception for a personal storage use on the subject property. Personal storage use in the M1 zoning district is permitted only on appeal and subject to special conditions. And on the screen and in your packets is enclosed the site plan that goes along with that. And on the site plan, first off, I'd like to point out that they are complying with a 20-foot landscape strip, which is required by the landscape and tree ordinance, which is a standalone ordinance. The special conditions are listed below for personal storage. The location requirements for this subject parcel which is less than 2 acres. It could be located in a B2 district, only by special exception. For the site requirements, all one-way drive aisles shall provide for a 10-foot wide travel lane, traffic direction, and parking shall be designated and signs painted, and a few more requirements there. The applicant has met all of those through revisions with comments back and forth through staff. Revised drawings were made to comply with all of the special conditions. There are adequate parking spaces, the 2 spaces that are required for the office, and 1 additional space for every 25 storage units that are there. There is currently recommended 67 storage units on site, which brings the total parking to 5 spaces. Staff's recommendation is approval for the appeal of the personal storage use. And one note on the surrounding character on Nichols Avenue, it is mostly predominantly M1 industrial use. And there are several other storage yards or metal buildings with that type of facade that are in that area. Be happy to answer any questions on behalf of staff. And I believe that Larry Smith is here on behalf of the applicant to answer any questions as well.
Could you bring back the site plan, please?
Yes, sir.
And this property is located is that right next to the warehouse bakery?
No, sir. This is on the east.
On
This
the
is on the
other
east
side.
side of 98.
And there's existing storage units there
No,
right now?
This is a vacant lot currently. So if I go back to the aerial, it's outlined in yellow on the right-hand side of your screen. It is completely, it has forestry trees on it currently.
East of it, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The west side of Greeno Road in Nichols, there are storage units currently on the south side of Nichols, on the west side of Greeno, close to where the bakery is that you're referring to.
So this is across from the Fairhope Brewery?
This is on the same side of the street as the Fairhope
Fairhope
Brewery.
Brewery,
Yes,
okay,
sir.
okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Will the applicant like to speak?
Yes, my name's Larry Smith. I'm with SE Civil. I'm the engineer for the project, and Mike did a great job explaining everything. I think we have altered everything to comply with the special conditions for storage. So I'm really just here if y'all have any questions or if the audience has any comments that I need to answer.
Emily, were there any complaints from any of the residences around or anything?
I received several calls, but no one was in opposition of the request.
Are there any other questions?
Looks like a no-brainer to me.
All right, thank you very much. We'd like to open the public portion. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? If you'll step up, please, and state your name and for us.
Good evening. I'm Guy Good. I live at 111 Riley Circle here in Fairhope. I'm also the president of the Spring Run Place Homeowners Association. Our concern at this point, or as we've become aware of this project, is water runoff from the site. Could you put that first slide back up, please? The water runoff from after this building is built, coming directly into our subdivision. We already have some significant problems with drainage in our subdivision now and have for a number of years. It's my understanding that there's going to be 2 holding ponds Is that correct?
Ask him.
Yeah. Yeah, you can come up and answer. Thanks.
Yes, we currently have planned 2 ponds, one up on Nichols and then one in the rear, neither of them which discharge towards the residential portion. The one on Nichols will discharge towards Nichols, and then...
Is it drawn in that drawing?
No.
The other one.
Um,
Can you put that first slide up again, please?
I have one pond here and one pond up there. The pond here discharges this direction. This is the corner of the residential property here. This is B2 zone property here, and then the other pond will be up along Nichols.
So my question is, if that pond at the rear of the building, our subdivision is downhill from that point. So where's the water going to go from that particular pond? How's it going to get out?
There'll be an overflow on that pond, which will discharge to the property to the south, which, again, is not the residential, it is the commercial. You know, we're at the first stage of the design, which is to see if we can even get the use approved before we start the full engineered design, because that's kind of the process that we go through. But the grading plan that we currently have has those 2 ponds and those 2 outfalls located. There's a ridge that runs through the middle of the property. Half of it flows to the south, half of the property flows to the north towards Nichols. And so we're going to comply with the stormwater requirements that are in the subdivision regulations, and we'll maintain the pond as required also in that same stormwater regulations.
A question. Do you know how many gallons this particular pond on the backside is going to be able to hold? Is there
Currently,
how big of a hole is going to be dug to absorb water?
There will be a hole big enough to absorb not absorb, but to discharge the runoff at the same rate that it currently discharges at. That's required by the subdivision regulations.
So you're assuring us that that water from that particular pond is not going to come southwest into our subdivision?
I can't
From the
assure you
pond.
that.
Mr.
from the
Chairman, can I
pond
interject,
directly,
please?
but-
Sure.
And Chairman, forgive me for interjecting, and board members, forgive me for interjecting, but so we don't get too carried away with this discussion, and I certainly absolutely appreciate the citizen visiting us today. This board does not conduct development application reviews.
Right.
We're here to consider a use on a property as required by the zoning ordinance. Any drainage requirements, as Mr. Smith has mentioned in the subdivision regulations, will be applied to this site, and this site must have a land disturbance permit issued by the building official and/or right-of-way permits issued by the building official. Now, post-development flows must be less than or equal to pre-development flows of stormwater. That is the standard of care. But we're here to consider a use on a piece of property. So certainly appreciate the comment, certainly appreciate the concern, but just wanted to reiterate for the board what it is we're considering on this particular item.
Okay, thank you.
Our second concern is if the building that is going to be erected comes up to the property line, it'll be 25 feet from a house directly in our subdivision, directly behind where this building is being put up. So I don't know what the dimensions are in regard to that.
The closest building to the rear property line is sitting about 22 and a half feet off of the property line, and that is the non-climate controlled storage building. The other one's sitting even further back from that, so the other one's closer to 35 feet. And they're all single story.
Okay. One other question, the parking areas, did I hear that they were going to be gravel or are they paved? Heard something about paint being applied to the parking areas?
the current design is for it to be paved.
Of course, it's a mood issue, but that would give us additional concern because that will cause much more water runoff. But that is our primary concern in the areas that we're just, this past weekend, of course, everyone was looking for pontoons to put on their houses and vehicles. But the amount of water that came through our subdivision on our 2 streets was just incredible. How our holding pond was able to hold all that and still discharge it properly and empty was beyond me, because I was in water up to, well, halfway up my leg, walking down the gutter and in the street gutter, and then between the 2 houses it looked like creek was coming through. I mean, it just, I mean, you can see the mildew on the sides of houses in that area, brick houses that have built up over the years of so much water. So that's our primary concern. I have nothing further to add at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak for or against the project? Okay. We'll open and close the public portion. Is there any discussion amongst the board members?
I just would like to ask one question. The review of this property and the runoff and all of that, I know that's not our bailiwick, but are they going to re-review this thing at all in light of the concerns in that area?
The building department, it'll go, once it gets through a building department, the building department reviews all the plans for compliance for all the city's regulations.
Yeah, and they have reviewed it already, right?
No, sir. They can't review a case until it gets approved by the board for the
Okay, I
use.
misunderstood. I thought it was reviewed already. Okay, so they will review it, and
This is the first step with the preliminary drawing. If the use for storage units gets approved, then Larry will go back and actually do some hard engineering to really do the pond calculations and do all of the engineering that is required
Okay.
once they have a final building plan in place.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
I move we approve.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay. We'll take a roll call vote. Emily?
Schneider,
Aye.
Stankowski,
Aye.
Avent,
Aye.
Vera,
Aye.
Slagle.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Okay. Third order of business is BOA 19.08.
So this is BOA 19.08. It's a public hearing to consider the request of James and Elizabeth Lowry for an administrative appeal to Article 4, Section E, which is the section of parking that's in the Fairhope zoning ordinance. The subject property is located on the north side of Atlanta and on the west side of Section Street, and is currently located B3B. On your screen, you can see the zoning map and the aerial map. The applicant is requesting to utilize a stacked parking for employee spaces. The applicant wishes to do an addition, and the added square footage of this addition requires that additional parking be added. And on the screen, we have the existing site plan, which shows an asphalt drive out front with the office building and a detached garage. And on the right side is the proposed site plan, where the proposed addition takes place of where the existing garage was, and the parking spaces are actually numbered and outlined. What we ran across was that the applicant had received a letter from the seller when he purchased the property that the property was zoned B2, which has a different set of setbacks compared to what the property was actually zoned B3B. So when he found out, going through his process of trying to do this, found out that he wasn't going to be able to add the addition to the rear as he had thought before. So the applicant met with staff, and we looked at several different possible solutions. And the only area to really put the addition was on the side. and the zoning ordinance does not prohibit, nor does it specifically allow stacked parking. Therefore, the case was brought before you, board, for administrative appeal. Staff's recommendation is approval of the stacked employee parking lot with the following conditions: that the employee parking spaces shall be clearly marked with appropriate signage and separate parking space striping, and all utilities be marked at the time of construction, and any necessary relocations shall be done at the owner's expense. And just to clarify, if we look at the drawing, recommending the staff or the double parking be for the employees only part that work there. The other spaces, which include a compact car space, the handicap van aisle, an access ramp, and 2 other full-size spaces, be utilized for guests. It's an accounting firm, so do not have a high intense use, not a lot of come and go traffic. One modification to the site, or because of the modifications to the site that they're doing, they're able to do a couple different things. For the addition itself to the house, or to the office rather, they're able to allow adequate office space for the current employees that were there and provide a little bit of privacy when their customers come in. 2, if you look, there's an existing encroachment of the current driveway on the property to the south, which with this improvements, that would be remedied, and that would no longer be crossing a property line. And they're also going to be able to add a handicap bathroom, and a handicapped access parking will be out there. So they'll be able to gain a lot of stuff is coming into compliance with this. There just was not adequate enough space for the parking spaces required by the zoning ordinance without doing a double stacked parking for the employee spaces. And that's where the first condition comes in, that the employee parking spaces will be clearly marked with appropriate signage and a separate parking space striping different from that of the citizen parking. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Question.
Yes,
Would
ma'am.
you define, and I would really like to see a picture of stacked parking? What is it exactly? I mean, when I think of that, I think of 2 levels, and a car drives in, an elevator lifts it up to the
No, man,
next level.
this is to be stacked behind parking for employees. That way, if employee 1, if you look on the screen or look on the proposed site plan, parking space number 7 and parking space number 8 are stacked. In order for parking space number 7 to exit to go to lunch or to go home, space number 8 would need to be vacated. And we did it for staff, knowing that the owner has taken on that extra additional headache if your people that are working for you are stacked there, that you ask whoever is parked behind you to kindly back out into the parking lot, so that way you can back out of your space as a stacked parking. So
we're
it's
not talking of
not
elevated.
not vertically stacked, more horizontally stacked.
Horizontally.
Yes, ma'am.
So like a
That-
parking spot, but just have
Oh,
2 cars.
Just-
all right.
Just kind of like a pull through, and there.
Yeah.
When I think of stacked, I'm talking about 2 cars here, 2 cars on top of them, and an elevator that lifts them up and down? No.
If we could do that, that would be amazing in
No,
in several different areas.
I
But
don't think it would look good there.
but no, ma'am. This is not asking for that. This is simply
Okay.
just one in front of
I see.
one in front of the other.
So number 7 better get there before number 8
Like at
arrives.
the Elks
Right.
Club. Elks Club.
Now,
they
when
do
you
that.
say compact cars, what
Parking
is
lot
what's the
not a
depth
big
of the
deal.
Uh,
car space?
The depth for the width is 9 feet for a compact car space, and that's where the zoning ordinance also requires a minimum of your 30% of your parking area to be for compact spaces, and no more than 40% be for compact car spaces.
So a compact car is 30, how many feet?
Is 9 feet.
9
is
feet.
9 feet wide.
And then
where
a-
your
a
regular
regular-
space is 10 feet wide.
Right, so 1 foot extra.
Yes, sir.
All right.
How far off of section is the beginning of the parking? How close will the cars be when they're parked?
Well, from Second Street, I do not have an exact measurement, about 25 feet, as Mr. Adams is stating.
So there's 25 feet open before the first car. Is that what they're saying?
Yes, ma'am. If you look at the picture on the left, currently, the asphalt drive that is there now is one big parking lot that extends all the way from the pavement of Section Street up through the right-of-way and onto the subject property.
So they're going to eliminate that with the new development, is that
No,
correct?
sir, no, they won't be eliminating that. They're utilizing that. They're adding additional pavement on the north side and removing the encroachment of pavement on the south side, but it'll still be the continuous pavement from Section Street to that. So there is a gap before while you have enough room to actually back up and turn around before you got to Section Street. So we're not introducing a backing into Section Street on that particular part of town with this.
That part of Section up on the hill.
yeah, I went and looked at
is so, has such a beautiful vision of that marina. So we're going to be, I guess for a small part, we're going to be looking over cars to look down into that marina on this Lowry property. Is that right?
You would be looking at an additional 2 parking spaces that would be there, as opposed to where there could be, currently they could park that there now. This is just now clearly identifying the number
I
of
see.
cars that can technically fit by the standards of the parking spaces in the zoning ordinance.
So right now, they could just park on the grass area, or
Cur-
whatever. it is.
Currently, majority of it is already asphalt.
Okay.
But they will be adding a little bit of asphalt, but they could park on the sections that were grass right now.
Chairman, can I ask a question? Right now, does everybody park perpendicular off of section?
I would defer that to Clay Adams. Far from the driving by it and the site visit that I've done, yes, sir, they all park perpendicular to it currently, the same, similar to the configuration that the new spaces are providing.
So when someone comes out, I don't see any dimensions, but how, you're not backing out into Section Street, you're backing out behind other cars?
You would be backing out.
Pulling.
I think I heard Mr. Schneider mention the Fairhope Elks Lodge, similar to where their parking spaces, they double stack, but then they still have another 15, 20 feet or so of actual parking area that they can back out into and then get pointed in the direction they want to go before they actually touch the edge of pavement of the street, which is similar to this here.
I have another question. In
Yes,
your
ma'am.
opinion, should we be, our board be waiting to make a decision on this stacked parking until the zoning ordinance gives direction on it?
Well, right,
Since there is nothing on in the zoning?
and that's why it's an administrative appeal, because currently there is nothing that mentions a double stack parking. As I said, it doesn't deny it, it doesn't
Right.
allow it, and it is something that we could look forward into the future, but the extent of the time frame when that would occur, I do not know.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to say to Ms. Slagel's comment that that is the decision that you were making tonight, is to address an issue that we don't address in the zoning ordinance. It doesn't specifically allow it, but it also doesn't specifically deny it. So you would be making that decision on whether or not we would allow stacked parking.
So
This-
will
this
the
is
zoning
not a
ordinance
variance
address
request.
it at some point? To put it,
It's not a
We can
variance
under,
request?
it is not a
No, this is
variance
not a
request.
variance.
This is not a
It's an
variance.
administrative appeal because
This
staff.
was a decision that staff, when we interpreted the zoning ordinance, at the staff level, we cannot interpret it as a yes, you can, or a no, you can't do it based on the zoning ordinance. So we had to be it on administrative appeal to the Board of Adjustments for the answer.
Chairman, board members, from time to time, there will be anomalies such as this that come about because no matter how well you write a document, the zoning ordinance nor the subdivision regulations nor any other regulation we could write could possibly contemplate every possible scenario.
Right.
So this is the absolute correct application of an administrative appeal to come before this body. So these are rare, but they're not out of the question.
Right. So double stack parking, there's other parts in the town that have this. The Elks Club, for example.
That's one example
Right.
where there is currently double stack parking. I believe they're zoned B3B
Right.
as well.
Right.
And board members understand too that what you have here is that there's a future building permit contemplated on the existing structure. So therefore, part of the analysis is what has to be done to make certain any alterations to that building come into compliance with the zoning ordinance. And so therefore, parking is part of the zoning ordinance because you have requirements for the number of occupants and the use capacity of the building. So this is the applicant doing it the right way in
Yeah.
advance, and rather than trying to make this a function of a building permit, they're taking the right steps and coming before this board in advance of their other plans.
Great. Thank you.
As
Thank
I said,
you very
Mr.
much.
Clay Adams, on behalf of the applicant, is here tonight. If you have
Okay.
any questions, that can be directed his way, or if you'd like to speak on
Okay.
behalf.
We'll have the applicant speak.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to speak to you. The Lowrys were not able to be here tonight. They were here
Clay,
last.
will you state your name? for the
Clay
record?
Adams, I'm sorry, with Walcott Adams Brunel Architects. I'm working with Jim and Liz Lowry. They were here last month, but were not able to be here tonight. They wanted to, but maybe I can clarify a few things. Mike did a great job of explaining the technical pieces of it. Just a few things. The Lowrys have owned the accounting firm since Mr. Patton sold it to them some 20 years ago. They don't plan on going anywhere. They hope to be here another 20 years. I want to make sure they're not adding any staff when they're adding the addition. In today's world, you can imagine the privacy of speaking to someone about their personal information. They have people working in the same office, so they'd like to clean that up. They're not looking to grow their business. They're looking to take care of that privacy issue so they can get people in their own office. And when we did that, the great opportunities from the parking lot are, I'll go over here and point at a few things and come back and speak, so I'll be on record. But this parking lot is on a neighbor's property, so we're going to take the same width and put it on our own property. Those things happen in Fairhope all the time. We find them working on many projects, but we'd like to clean that up. That doesn't need to be like that. The issue, you take that same width and slide it up, we're really not blocking any additional view. We're just moving that width up and organize the parking in the size that the city wants. We don't have any handicap parking now. It's an asphalt area. One other thing, let me point out. Everyone parks here, and when they back out and leave and pull into section, backing into section would be dangerous. So this is the parking width, and that's the back out space. That's the parking width, and that's the back out space. So it's the same. We would never do anything where we had 6 or 8 people backing into section, and it is a busier road, faster traffic. So we're maintaining that. And we've got handicap spaces that we don't have. We got compact cars. So we're doing a parking lot that meets all the current regulations and fixing the problems that exist. And what we're doing is asking that our employees stack one behind the other. And there's been one similar building type that does that. My office at 1 South School Street, we stack a bunch of we have 20 employees, believe it or not, at our office, if y'all know where it is, at 1 South School Street across from the campus. And we stack employees all the time, and we just communicate. So they do know the owners come in early. They'll probably park in the front spaces. They tend to stay longer, and the other employees will be behind them. And the parking lot will fix the problems that exist. A couple other things that are great in the, we spoke with Buford and Mike, and then we went to Eric on the building side of it, is their current office building has a restroom that meets none of the current criteria. So we're going to add a handicap toilet that meets all that criteria along with that other one, and fix a piece of the building that needs to be updated. So we're fixing the parking lot, stacking some employee parking, doing a much better job for their clients, and making the building better at the same time. And none of the real parking conditions that exist, which is backing out on your own property and pulling out on section, will change at all. So if there are any other questions I could answer, I'll
What
be
kind of business do they do?
It's an accounting, Mr. Patton ran that accounting firm forever. He might have run it for 30 years, and then the Lowrys have owned it for some 20 years. And they don't have a huge, a lot of times people are just picking up, or it's sent electronically, but every now and then they do have a few clients that come in. They
And
park, on the
there's-
existing, they kind of park haphazard, and the neat thing about the way we're trying to do it, per our discussions, is it's going to be very organized. The person will know where to park. It'll be striped different. The handicap will have signs on it. So there's a lot of positives to the new design of the parking lot.
How many people actually work in this office
Yeah,
building?
there's only 5 people that work in there.
And then with the addition, is that,
That we're not going to add any. That's not their intent. Again, it's to space people out and put them in their own office.
okay.
Yes. Mostly due to that privacy
I don't have a
issue.
problem.
And add a bathroom that I mentioned that meets criteria.
Question, will the parking places all be concrete?
Either asphalt or concrete.
Okay.
But yes. And the existing area is asphalted. You can see on the existing, it's hard to see, but it's right in about the middle of the existing site plan. It says asphalt drive. That's, either one would be acceptable to them.
It looks like that property drains into, or onto Section Street, does it not?
It kind of falls, but again, we would be adding very little runoff except the proposed footprint of the addition. And we don't come close, I don't think, to meeting the overall area allowed on that site. And there is a lot of grass. I won't go here real quick again. All of this will not be disturbed, in the grass existing state, which is unlike a lot of commercial buildings, with, and properties that are developed almost property line to property line. It's a nice green space behind the building.
Okay.
And in the front yard, a little bit, you can see between the building and the sidewalk, that's nice little green space that still exists.
All right, thank you. We'll now open the public portion of the meeting. Is there anybody to speak for or against this project? We'll open and close the public portion. Do I hear a motion from the board?
I think we ought to approve it.
There's your motion. But I think we should put in the conditions that are listed by staff.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So approval based on the conditions requested by staff. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. We'll take a roll call vote.
Schneider,
Approved.
Stankowski,
Aye.
Avent,
Aye.
Approved.
Vera, Slagle.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Other order of business is BOA 19.09, amendment to the City of Fairhope Board of Adjustment bylaws regarding attendance of members.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members.
Oh, nice.
This requires action by the board to amend the bylaws. And from Article 3, this would add Article 3, attendance. Attendance at board meetings by all regular members is mandatory. If in a calendar year, any member should miss 4 meetings, the chairman shall notify the Fairhope City Council of said absences. So this is, and Chairman, board members, this is a discussion that the board had with staff several months ago, and this was our first opportunity to put it on the agenda of a meeting for consideration by the board. This gives the board and the chairman and the chairperson a tool if it becomes necessary to take action.
Question.
I don't have an 09.
Is this in the calendar year, so is this retroactive to
Oh, maybe I do
January
have a
1
That's what the hell
of
we're talking about.
2019?
And yeah, and Ms. Slagle, as Ms. Boyd answered, you know, if this,
don't have it.
as a part of this adoption, if this board wanted to make that part of this action, they certainly could.
Okay.
They certainly could. So that desire is contemplated.
Thank you.
Now, it's the missed 4 meetings, is that consecutive meetings or just any 4 meetings?
Any 4 meetings. Any 4 meetings.
So if you miss a meeting, you have to ask for an excuse, basically?
That is a good question, Chairman. That is a good question, Chairman. And I think that the best way to address that is that since the wording, we will kind of abide by the four corners rule that an attorney applies to a
read that,
document. It says that the chairman shall notify the Fairhope City Council of said absences. So I think we can defer to the judgment of the chairman that if the circumstances surrounding the absence do not justify contact to the city council, I think we can defer to the chairman, and I think we're on solid footing to defer to the chairperson as the administrator of the meeting. If the board is not comfortable with that, we can certainly legally vet it, but I think since the chairperson runs the meeting, is in charge of running the meetings, I think that's a fair judgment to make. But board members, the adoption of this action is a standard action, so therefore we do have a case number for consideration. So enacting or opening a public hearing would be in order to properly act upon the request of staff.
Thank you. Do I have anybody from the public that would like to speak for or against this adoption?
This is 1909.
We'll open and close that. Any discussion with the board members?
We're not going to backtrack this year, are we? It starts today.
Well, then, as Ms. Slagle stated, a motion may, the members may wish to reflect that in their motion.
What
So-
is your concern?
Well, I've missed more than 4, I
Oh.
think.
What was her
Well-
concern?
She's felt like she's missed more than 4 meetings.
Oh,
So is this going to be on a calendar year basis?
Yes.
yeah.
It's not going to be,
It says,
you know, boom, 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 where you move the year?
No, calendar year.
So it'll be a calendar year
Correct.
calculation for, I guess, unexcused
Correct.
absences is what it boils down to?
Yeah, that's certainly a reasonable, I think that's a reasonable requirement that the chairman exercise discretion
Yeah.
on the nature of the absence.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion
Okay.
to accept the recommendation by staff and make it active July 15th, 2019, and that's the case of BOA 1909.
can I ask why you're putting a July date and not a January one, since it's done in the
Because
calendar?
I don't think anybody was aware of that, and to be fair, is that this is something that's brought up tonight. This is the first time I ever heard it, I think Christina, it's the first time she's heard it, she has concerns on it, so, that's the main reason on the cap.
So, but it's based on a calendar year, so is your calendar year starting in July, or is it starting in January? Well, I'm just looking to what it says here.
Well, if it's gonna be on a calendar year,
That was my question.
I guess what we could do is
Make it have it a calendar year, but.
calendar year, but it starts today, and anybody missed from July 15th to December 31st is, you know, have to be considered to be.
And then after that, it would go
Go
January.
back in January.
So, in other words, so that would be acceptable. So if the board member would amend his motion to reflect the balance of calendar year 2019, the balance of calendar year 2019, and then beginning in successive calendar years, beginning January 1.
Yes, it's January 1 of 2020.
2020.
That would be
Okay.
my motion.
Do I
I'll
have-
second it.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Emily?
Yes, I have it.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I have it.
We'll take a roll call vote.
Schneider. Oh, that was loud.
Approved?
Stankowski.
Aye.
Avent.
Aye.
Vera.
Aye.
Slagle.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Very good. So we can now take two more absence.
No,
Four.
four.
I mean, I'm talking about for the rest of the year. You got a half a year to go.
I know, but you got four.
The next
Oh, you
order
get four?
on the agenda is BOA 19.10.
This is BOA 19.10. It's a public hearing to consider the request of Holly Pursley for a variance to the separation setback requirements between a principal structure and an accessory structure. Subject property is located at 22283 Main Street. Up on your screen on the left, you have the zoning map. Parcel is zoned R1. On the right side is an aerial view. And you'll notice on the aerial view and on the zoning view that the subject property backs up to Fly Creek. Its general location is on the west side of Main Street, approximately 1,000 feet north of Main Street, of the intersection of Main Street, Highway 104, and US Highway 98. So just north of the Flower Clock. The applicant is wanting to put in a pool at their house, and they're requesting a variance from the 10-foot required separation distance between an accessory structure and the principal structure per Fairhope zoning ordinance, Table 3.3, to a 1-foot separation. And I'll explain the pool being accessory structure in just a second. And below is the dimensions table right out of the zoning ordinance, showing where the 10-foot separation is required. On the left hand of your screen is a proposed plan for where the proposed pool will go with the existing footprint of the house. They wish to install the swimming pool, which follows the accessory structure setbacks, but the swimming pool does not count towards the percentage of the lot coverage. A swimming pool is a unique accessory structure that, again, the zoning ordinance does not specifically call out precisely limitations on a pool, but it has been noted that is in the past has counted for the setbacks, but not for the principal lot for the lot coverage of that. So I just want to hope I made that clear. That's why we're looking at a swimming pool as an accessory structure. Granted, it is not a covered structure, it does not have a roof, which is typically what defines an accessory structure. But for the pool itself, it is defined. We do consider it an accessory structure. And the property is unique in the sense, as I said, it backs up to Fly Creek, so the topography slopes down. And currently, there's a retaining wall that had to be built in the rear yard because of the topography of the lot. And the engineering of the retaining wall has tiebacks that are used to anchor the wall, and they extend 10 foot east back towards the house, creating an area that cannot be disturbed on or built on. And on the little snip of the survey that is located on the screen right there, it shows the bulkhead, and past the bulkhead is the rest of the property, which you look on the aerial, it's all wooded and flows back down to where the creek is. So the area that's between the bulkhead and 10 feet cannot be built upon, and the proposed pool is between that and the house. And the 10-foot separation has to be measured from the principal structure. Now, unique to this house, the bottom floor is actually under the covered porch. It's not a conditioned space, it's not a walled space, it's just a concrete slab that's used as a patio. On the next slide, I have a picture to show that. But if you do not count the porch as the principal structure and you apply that 10-foot setback, that would allow for a pool with a maximum width of 14 feet, and there would be just a 1-foot separation from the existing concrete slab to where the pool would be. And this is two pictures taken of the left and right, merged together of what the rear of the house looks like. As you can see, the principal structure, including the porch is elevated off the ground and is strictly used for an outdoor screened-in porch. And the primary residence is a flat wall that goes across. And here's a view of the rear yard and the retaining wall looking from the concrete patio. There's a small picket fence that is built to fence in what is the actual usable rear yard of the property on top of the retaining wall. Once you get past that, it's wooded vegetation that is not maintained. As I said, due to the topography, it would take some extensive engineering to actually construct something on that. Staff's only concern was a safety issue with the possibility of being able to get from that second floor porch and jumping from there into the pool. The city of Fairhope's building official may require a hold harmless agreement to be signed. And also, the applicant at the time of the building permit shall provide engineered drawings showing that the design of the pool isn't going to undermine the existing footers that are there for the house and not cause a safety concern. Other requirements that could be required by the building department at the time is that the pool is actually anchored into the existing concrete footers that are underground to secure those and make those a complete unit altogether, so that way they're relying on each other's strength for the foundation. So the applicant's advised to consult with the building department to ensure that any structural concerns are addressed with the desired pool design. So staff's recommendation is approval of the separation setback from 10 foot to 1 foot. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here with us tonight, and we'd be happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you. At this time, would the applicant like to speak for or against? Or you'll state your name for us.
Holly Pursley.
Yeah.
My kids and I would be thrilled if you approve this variance. My husband is hoping you disapprove it.
Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak for or against this project? We'll open and close this portion. Okay, board members, any discussion?
I have a question for Mike. So Mike, the retaining wall goes north-south on the west side of the property.
That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The only question I would have is, there is no intention to ever cover this pool with, some kind of building or anything like that?
Covering the pool would not be allowed. If the pool was recommended to be covered, then it would come for you in the similar way as being an accessory structure, but would have a different recommendation from staff.
Okay.
So covered is like a screen like you see on top of pools?
Covered would be roofed with a metal roofing or something, which I don't know too many people that cover the swimming pool to get away from the sunshine.
Right. Okay. All right. We have a recommendation from the board?
Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me.
I make a
recommend- go ahead.
I make a proposal, we approve it. Seems reasonable to me.
Have a second?
With staff comments.
Following
With
the-
staff comments?
Yeah, fine.
Okay.
What are you looking for?
He made it,
Approval from 10 foot to 1 foot.
Yeah,
Okay.
with staff recommendations.
Right.
on-
with staff's
With-
recommendation.
Do
What
we-
are they?
I'll second that.
Yeah, so the staff
You're
recommendations.
talking about no diving off the second level and,
No, they're recommending a engineering drawing plan.
Yeah.
Which-
Okay.
That'll come from the building official at time of permit will require that documentation to satisfy the building department review.
Do I have a second?
I second that.
Okay.
Schneider,
Yay, A?
Stankowski,
Aye.
Avent,
Aye.
Vera,
Aye.
Slagle.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Our last order of business is,
Well, we have
two more, excuse me. I didn't look at the last page. The last two. BOA 19.11.
This is BOA 19.11. It's a public hearing to consider the request of Refuge Coffee Roastery for a special exception to allow a limited manufacturing for the property zoned B2 general business. On the screen, as you've seen in the last few presentations, on the left-hand side, you have the zoning map, and on the right side, you have the aerial. So the currently the property is zoned B2. It is surrounded by M1 to the west and to the south and to the east, with a small parcel on the southeast side being zoned B2. And it's located just 300 feet north of the intersection of Greeno Road and Nichols Avenue. Refuge Coffee is requesting a limited manufacturing use, which is not allowed by right, but by special exception in Fairhope zoning ordinance for the property at 314 South of Greeno Road. The applicant desires to have an industrial coffee roaster to allow them to roast and package coffee for retail and wholesale at the subject property. And it comes to you as a special exception because in our use table, it is symbolized with the open dot, which means that it must come before the Board of Adjustments for approval of the use. Just a few comments below is an excerpt from Fairhope zoning ordinance, Article 9, Section B.6, which defines the limited manufacturing use, which is what they're requesting. If you look at A, limited, is any small-scale manufacturing use that has a retail or service component in which presents no outward, visible, or perceptible presence of manufacturing activity. So essentially, it's allowing you to manufacture something on-site as long as it's not a visible intrusion. If you're standing from the outside driving by, you would otherwise not have any idea that it was going on. And this use is allowed by right in the M1 districts, which, as I mentioned, borders the subject property on 3 sides. There's a review criteria for use appeals, which is as follows. And any other application to the board shall be reviewed under the following criteria, and if relief granted, only upon the concurring vote of 4 board members. Compliance with a comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan refers to Thomas Hospital and gives guidance to support the hospital. Staff feels that a coffee shop, which is also in the medical overlay district, would support both staff and visitors to the hospital. There are no other compliances noted with any other planning document. There's none noted. Compliance with the standards and goals and the intent of the ordinance. Subject property is in the medical overlay district and is supporting use to the hospital and is therefore in keeping with the intent of the ordinance. The character of the surrounding property, including any pending development activity. The subject property is bordered to the north by Thomas Hospital and M1 zone property to the south, and all adjacent properties are also in the medical overlay district. And just for people listening or people watching, the medical overlay district is a special district that allows extra uses to be allowed despite whatever the property is owned. Whatever the property is owned, the allowed uses by right and by special appeal are there, but they also give some extra uses, such as some different restaurant uses and retail uses that if a property is zoned, for instance, R2 or R1 or a residential district, you could still use the other uses prescribed by the medical overlay district. Adequacy of public infrastructure to support the proposed development. There's no issues noted. Any impacts would be minor in nature. There's currently a building on the site now. Impacts on natural resources. Subject property, again, is developed and no negative impacts anticipated. Compliance with other laws and regulations. There's no issues. Compliance with other applicable laws and regulations of other jurisdictions. No issues noted. Impacts of adjacent property, including noise, traffic, visible intrusions, potential physical impacts, and property values. No issues noted. No impacts on the surrounding neighborhood, including noise, traffic, visible intrusions, potential impacts, and property values. No issues noted. Overall benefit to the community. The use proposed is in walking distance to the hospital and would provide a service to both staff and visitors to the hospital. It would allow them a kind of a refuge, hence no pun intended with the name of the coffee shop, but allow them to get out of the hospital and somewhere that they can walk and don't have to try to get in their car to drive downtown to any of the other local coffee shops in the area. Compliance with sound planning principles. Staff believes this use is in keeping with sound planning principles. Compliance with terms and conditions of any zoning approval. No issues noted. And any other matter relating to health, safety, and welfare of the community. There are no issues noted as well. Just an additional comment. The industrial coffee grinder must conform to the limited manufacturing confines, which presents no outward visible or perceptible presence of manufacturing activity. And I reiterate that because that is the biggest part of having a limited industrial use as opposed to just a industrial use, which could have different types of loud noises and intrusions that could be seen from outside of the shop. Proposed floor plan shows that the grinder is in a separate room with nothing protruding out of the building. Staff's recommendation is approval of the appeal for the limited manufacturing use at 314 South Greeno Road. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Now, this was a coffee shop previously, is that correct?
It has been several different uses.
Okay.
I'm not 100% certain what the previous use was.
It was a
If you-
bakery.
So, there was some type of food there. If you look at Google Maps, I think it currently shows that it's 1010 food truck, something of that nature. But other uses has been kind of food-oriented, restaurant-style type uses.
Thank you.
So, Mike, it says to roast and package coffee for retail and wholesale. So this will be a restaurant, like a coffee shop with other food available?
To my knowledge,
I mean,
we have the
I
applicant adhered-
picture it like the coffee loft then, except this will actually manufacture the coffee, or else like the one down the road.
Yes, ma'am. To my knowledge, and the applicant can answer in more detail, but they're currently located in the downtown Fairhope area, and they're relocating to this area to add the roaster in addition to the coffee that they do serve on site.
This time, would the applicant like to come up? If you'll state your name for us.
Hey, I'm Jordan Lawhorn. I manage the coffee shop currently at Bancroft, right around the corner here. We're gonna keep that existing location for the cafe. It's the minimal restaurant operation happening. We do some pastries. You asked about foods and stuff. We do some pastries, but not a high operating kitchen where we'd be cooking and whatnot. So what our goal is, since April and going to Greeno, is basically getting a mid-size roaster, that coffee roaster, which there's small batch and then there's kind of mid-size. The mid-size is for the purpose of manufacturing, packaging, labeling, sending these coffee bags out. We've had a lot of requests from restaurants in the areas, even like Fairhope Inn, hotels or small, bed and breakfast locations who would want to have our coffee there, but we're not allowed to do that unless we're manufacturing permitted, the processing permit, of course. So we ran into the problem with the zoning to actually go from supplying our own coffee shop at Greeno, which is approved, to supplying outward, restaurants, online sales, and like a bed and breakfast or something like that. So that's our goal, is to get approved for manufacturing outside of our walls.
So this coffee shop is going to be the primary business, and where would people park?
There's currently, right
I mean,
in
I know
front-
they'll be going to the hospital and people might be walking over, but let's assume that
We have spaces allotted for our own parking right there in the front. There's, I think, 20, is that right? 20 spaces.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, one other question. Is there a drive-through window that somebody's going to the hospital and decides, I'm going to get a coffee?
No, unfortunately, there's not drive-through. We hope to block off some spaces right in the front where they can have like 5-minute parking for them. They pull in, they come in, get their coffee, won't take long. Or we could probably run it out to them.
Okay.
But the Burrow was a coffee shop that was there before the bakery. So you're correct in thinking that. And they said that their main business was that hospital, and they would even deliver some coffees to that hospital.
That brings me to my last question. Okay, you're going to manufacture this coffee, bag it, and everything, and now, where is the truck going to come to pick that stuff up and go deliver it?
So as far as...
Do you have a dock or something on this?
No, we wouldn't reach that level of operation. If you've ever seen Fairhope Roasting located at Warehouse Bakery, they're currently distributing to almost all Publix locations, so they're distributing a lot, but they have a van that actually they load up with this coffee and they go and they take it to those locations. Or even like a pallet that possibly a truck could back in.
So
to
you're just going to
retrieve.
use the parking lot to load it?
No, we wouldn't be loading a truck at that capacity. We would intend on just local sales and possibly delivering in a car or a van. It's a low production operation.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak for or against? If you'll come up to the front mic, please.
My name is Robert Topeka, and I'm the owner of the property over there. And I've owned that property for 25 years or so, and maybe more than that. That building, that property started out as a drugstore many years ago. It was a pharmacy, and somebody drove around the pharmacy, and there was a place you could pick up stuff and go around the building. And that after acquiring that building, I doubled the size of the building, so right now it's a 3,000 square foot building. And it was occupied for a number of years by Emperor Clock Company as their accounting staff function. And then that building has been on the rental market for a number of years, and for about 10 years it was occupied by Thomas Hospital as their diabetes center. And they the Thomas Hospital moved their diabetes center someplace else. Since that time, somebody came in there and ran a coffee shop because they thought a coffee shop was a good idea. And that didn't work out too well for that tenant, and another guy came by and wanted to make that into a cupcake shop, and that cupcake shop didn't work out too good, and that and you can figure all the reasons why it might not work out too good. Personally, I don't know why somebody driving down Greeno Road would stop at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and buy a cupcake, but some people do that, and that Refuge Coffee Company, I think, has a real good chance of success in there because they sell good coffee, they have a good clientele downtown, and they have a good coffee shop. And the business of roasting coffee in there is an adjunct to them, something that was unexpected. And if they were not roasting coffee in there, I do not believe there would be a need for a variance or an amendment or a zoning modification. And that as far as the future of what could be over there and what would look good over there, Refuge Coffee Company would look good over there because they have a outstanding reputation downtown in terms of parking. There's a number of parking spaces out front, which I believe could handle a sizable business. That truck that you see out there, a food truck, that food truck suddenly appeared and parked over there, and that the tenant occupying the space didn't say anything to the food truck, and I didn't either, and the food truck wanted to park there, and no one was complaining about it, then so be it, and that the long-term possibility of that food truck being there, I don't know. But anyhow, it seems like the people in the hospital love to walk over to this area. A lot of people walk to that food truck. Certainly a lot of people walk to that coffee place, and that it would be an asset to the community. It would look good, and that I think it would be a successful business, and that except for the fact that you need a variance, you know, this, it seems like this would be an automatic, but I guess it's not an automatic because of the zoning requirements and restrictions. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I happen to own the building, and I have a vested interest in seeing that building successful. That's my story.
Thank you very much.
Question from anybody? Be happy to answer a question.
I wish you well.
Thank you.
My only question is if it changes businesses, then does the special request still uphold, or?
What's the question?
Yes, ma'am, it does. Whenever it's a request of this nature, it goes with the property, not with the applicant.
However, that can be limited. You can restrict that use to the change of tenant or occupant, that any additional manufacturing use would have to come back and receive
For reapproval.
another. Mhm.
So we have the public portion still open, and we'll close that if there's no one else that would like to speak for it. Is there a motion or any discussion amongst the board members?
We're approving a special exception, is that right?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
I like the detailed drawing.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I move that we approve the special exception for a limited manufacturing use, 314 South Greeno.
Is there any restrictions? that you
I
would
would
like?
apply the restrictions that Christine said, that it's limited just to this particular
business.
tenant.
Tenant.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Schneider,
Yay.
Stankowski,
Aye.
Avent, Vera,
Aye.
Slagle.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Our last order of business is BOA 19.12.
So this is BOA 19.12. It's a public hearing to consider the request of Fairhope Public Utilities for a special exception to allow public utility for property zoned R6 Mobile Home Park District at 621 Nichols Avenue. And on your screen on the left, highlighted in black is the outline of the subject parcel. And on the right side is the aerial subject parcel outlined in yellow. General location is the northwest corner of Young Street and Nichols Avenue. And if you're familiar with this area, directly across the street on the east side is a current electrical substation owned by the city of Fairhope currently. So Fairhope Utilities is requesting a public utility, which is not allowed by right, but by special exception in Fairhope zoning ordinance for the property at 621 Nichols Avenue. Subject property is currently zoned R6, a mobile home park district, and the applicant desires to install a new electrical substation that allow for Fairhope Utilities to better serve its customers. A few comments. Stewart Engineering, the engineer of record, provided a comprehensive engineering report that focused on the age, capacity, and future growth projections for each of the current 6 substations. The report suggested the elimination of the Church Street substation and build a new double substation on Young Street where an existing feeder can be utilized to save cost and offer a more reliable service to its customers. There were 3 different sites that were considered, and based on its topography and the character of the surrounding neighborhood, the northwest corner of Young Street and Nichols Avenue was chosen. As I said, a current substation is on the northeast corner of the same intersection, and it will be removed. So the new substation will be eliminating the substation off of Church Street and replacing the one that is currently on the corner of Nichols and Young Street. The same review criteria as the previous one. I'll touch on a few that are applicable. Compliance with a comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan refers to infrastructure and states that the city needs to plan, provide, and maintain cost-effective and efficient infrastructure that promotes orderly growth and meets environmental goals. The character, item D, the character of the surrounding property, including any pending development. Subject property is bordered to the north and west by R6 zoning and to the south by B1 shopping district and R2 to the east. And on that east corner is currently where the one substation resides now. F, impacts on natural resources, including existing conditions. The subject property is mostly cleared in the center of the lot, and the perimeter has a wooded vegetation that will act as its own natural buffer. And go down to K, the overall benefit to the community. The use proposed will enhance an aged, outdated system, providing a better service to Fairhope utility customers. Staff believes that this is in use with keeping in good planning principles. Staff recommends approval of the appeal for public utility use at 621 Nichols Avenue. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, and any technical questions I will direct to Richard Peterson, Director of Public Utilities.
Is this where Mitchell's Appliance is, or that they're across the street?
That's across the street. This lot is currently vacant. As I said, there's lots of woods around all four sides of it. And I know Richard Peterson is working to keep as much of that wooded vegetation there as possible to use for a buffer for any of the surrounding properties that are there.
Wasn't this property, Richard, always designated for a substation? I was thinking Riviera Utilities owned this property at one time for it.
That is currently a lay-down yard, and Riviera Utilities will be signing that over to Fairhope Utilities.
So who owns the property now? The city of Fairhope?
Fairhope single tax.
Okay, owns it.
Is Fairhope going to build it? The city?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Well, the submission that was made, and they don't really tell you who made it. Oh, yeah, they do. Director of Operations. Very good. I thought it was very clear and understanding and sounds very reasonable to me.
Yes, sir. Mr. Richard Peterson did a great job on the narrative that he supplied.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak for or against the project? Okay, sir, if you'll stand up and state your name for us.
Name and address, please.
My name is Charles Garrick. I live at 398 Boone Lane in Fairhope. I've spoken with Richard a time or two. What hasn't been mentioned here, and the reason I'm mentioning this is because I want y'all to take it into consideration when you approve or disapprove. There is a fence around that property that makes the property 200 feet wide and 200 feet deep. The city had a survey done of the property. The fence is not on the property line. The fence on the west side of the property is 10 feet to the west of the property line. So that's a strip that runs 10 feet wide, 200 feet long from north to south. The fence on the north border of that property is 30 feet north of the actual property line that runs east and west. So by the survey, that property is not 200 by 200. It's one, if you're looking at it from Nickel Street, it's 190 wide. If you're looking at it from Young Street, it's 170. Is that not correct? By the survey?
No, sir, that's not correct.
So this is how the county reflects the property, sir.
That's the way that the county does it. But the actual survey that was done by the city, the city had the survey done, shows the property line, and it explains why the property line is where it is. When they widened Nickel Street, they took 30 feet off of this 200 north and south line. When they widened Young Street, they took 10 feet off of the north and south line. That's why the actual survey shows that there's a 10-foot difference in the north-south line and a 30-foot difference in the east-west line.
Who built the fence?
Riviera Utilities built the fence.
Yeah,
Does Riviera own that property?
No, sir, the Fairhope Single Tax Colony owns it. Riviera had the lease on it. They used it for a pole yard.
May I speak just a minute? Mr. Garrick is correct that the original survey that Riviera Utilities actually provided, there were, the lease descriptions were pretty vague about where the property line started and stopped. And so I went to the single tax and I asked them, you know, who makes the determination for all that? And I've got minutes of some of the meetings that they had back in the late 50s. And then Riviera had an engineering plat or drawing that showed exactly how that block was laid out with specific dimensions to that lot that were incorporated in minutes of the meeting that they had prior to single tax approving the way that property was split. And so I gave all that information to the surveyor, and then he subsequently changed the survey to show the 200 by 200. And I think I forwarded that to you in an email.
Yeah, you gave me all that information.
Right.
Yeah, you gave me all
So
that.
the surveyor's confident that it is 200 by 200. All the property dimensions that everybody owns and is in leases that everybody has in that block meet the dimensions so that it shows 200 by 200 on ours, and everybody else has property that is equal to what their lease says based on the plat that was done, that was approved by the single tax colony at a board meeting back in either 1959 or 1960.
So what is
Has
Mr.
there
Garrett
been,
saying?
has the approval been updated? In other words, they're
Well,
not going to cause a legal,
I have given all that information to single tax as well.
and is, to the best of your knowledge, they have approved it? They have approved your plan?
I don't think there's anything to approve. I think that from what I've heard from the single tax is they accept what a surveyor has determined is what is to be part of the, as to what is accurate to the dimensions of the lot.
Single tax had to sign off on the application for it to make it to the board tonight. So they have approved the use that we're proposing this evening.
I'm a little confused. So Mr. Garrick is saying something different than what you're saying? Is that what I'm hearing? On the dimensions of the lot?
Well, I think Mr. Garrett, and I was the first one that contacted them to see if they had any information because they have owned that property for a long time. And
He brought it to our attention.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to be honest with everybody about
Right.
this, and from talking with single tax and looking at the records that Riviera had when they leased the property, and the information that single tax approved in the minutes based on that property being 200 by 200, I gave all that information to the surveyor, and he has gone through the entire block between Morphy and Nichols and Young and Mershon, and has confirmed all of those dimensions are as they were shown on both Riviera's plats, on the Baldwin County tax map.
I'm gonna ask a question,
And
and
how it
that-
was set
this
up.
may sound kind of stupid, but what does it make a difference if it's 190, 180 to 190, and what does it make a difference?
190
then-
by 170
Yeah.
is what it would be.
Yeah, what does that make a difference?
Well, the site plan for the substation becomes more complicated.
If the dimensions are different?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I intrude?
This is not,
And I think I was about to, echo Mr. Avant's comment he was about to make, is that certainly, board members, details are important. Details are very important. And what we're talking about right now is a staff-level issue that staff will certainly resolve. And we are certainly thankful to our citizens for pointing out something if there's something we need to resolve. The issue before this board is approving the use
That's right.
of a public utility on subject property. So certainly, details are important. It will be handled. You have exceptionally well-qualified staff that will take care of that, and Mr. Peterson. Just want to redirect the board to considering the use of public utility on this piece of property, please.
Okay, I just have one more question. This fenced area, is that 200 by 200?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're gonna take and get it resolved as to who owns it and how it's gonna be?
Now, I think I've done that.
Okay, so
I
it's,
think it is resolved that it is 200 by 200.
okay, so the fenced area is 200 by 200.
Correct.
Do you intend to move the fence at all?
No, sir. We intend to use the full 200 by
Okay,
200 piece of property.
does it make a difference if the fence isn't moved?
It doesn't make a difference to our vote.
It makes a difference if they use the full 200 by 200 that's inside the fence, because according to the survey, that lot is not 200 by 200. Now, I know that I'm not here to argue about what it actually is. What I would like for y'all to do as a voting body is to research it yourself before you make a vote, before you approve it or disapprove it.
Charles, that's not our job here. Our job is for the special exception for the zoning.
The dimensions,
This is not a site plan review. This is, we're voting for an exception to the zoning. That's all we're doing.
Well-
We don't have any say-so or that we can't consider anything because of a survey dispute. That's not our job.
I understand that. All I wanted y'all to do was to take into consideration that there is some controversy here. Now, I don't know how it's gonna be resolved. I can't tell you that. I know how I want it to be resolved. And Richard knows how he wants it to be resolved. And the city knows what they want. But all I'm asking y'all to do is to consider all these things before you vote on it. You know, look at it from both sides, not just the city side.
We don't
Okay.
need to look out on what was proposed to us. And that's not, and the only thing we're looking at is a special exception.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to do is open that can of worms to get some gears turning on y'all's part, you know.
Okay, I got one more question. This 200 by 200 fenced area,
Yeah.
just the fenced area, okay? Okay, there's a piece of property within the fenced area that is causing a problem, causing your problem.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. Now the question is, who owns that property, that part that you have a concern about?
Well,
The single
that's
tax
kind
owns the
of,
property.
the
Wait a
Fairhope
minute.
Single Tax Colony
Both of you
owns it.
spoke at the same time. I
The
couldn't.
Fairhope Single Tax Colony actually owns it.
Okay,
I don't know if y'all have gotten it transferred yet, but Riviera Utilities had the lease.
I
Now,
understand that.
Yeah, the adjoining property is Winter Haven Incorporated. It's a trailer court. That's who I'm speaking for.
Okay,
Winter Haven joins it on the north side and the west side.
but it's not encroaching on the trailer park's ownership.
Well, I don't know if it is or not, no. As a matter of fact, we didn't even know that there was any question about where the property line was until Mr. Peterson pointed it out. And he sent me the surveys. Now, I'm probably not, of course, if I'd have had them, y'all would not have wanted to look at them, I guess, because that's not your job.
Well, in the letter, the Riviera Utilities have basically said, we don't have a problem with this whole plan. And it looks like it's going to update the electrical distribution for that area.
Yeah, and I'm all about that.
Okay,
I'm all about that, but I don't want to provide any land for it.
okay. But the single tax colony doesn't have a problem with it either?
They didn't have a problem with it.
Okay, well, it looks to me like it's a closed deal.
Well, I've done as much due diligence to get to what it is meant to be as I know how to do. I've shared that with the Garrett's too.
Yeah.
And the information Riviera had when they took the lease, the minutes of the meeting, and even the descriptions of the lease had some reference to everything less the right-of-way. And if you take the less the right-of-way part of the description, you can use the 200 by 200 as what it was intended to be. I mean, I've gone through it time and time again, and I don't know that there's any way to interpret it any other way than that it was intended for a 200 by 200 piece of property to be allowed on that corner. And in fact, in the minutes, you'll see that it was intended to meet an M1 zoning use at that time. I mean, I don't know what else to do, but I'm pretty confident that the surveyors looked at the information and agrees with it. Nobody from single tax has disputed what the surveyor has determined. All the dimensions of every other description match everything.
So
that
the
allows
surveyor
this
is
to be
saying it's 200 by 200.
It's 200 by 200.
No. They're not saying that.
Well,
That's not.
let me ask one more question.
It doesn't
It
matter,
doesn't
guys.
matter.
Why are we having this
That has nothing to do
discussion?
with us.
I
Yeah,
just
I'll
want to
leave,
ask
I'll
one
leave
more
it with you.
question.
I just wanted y'all to consider that and know my side of
Right.
it, you know.
Thank you very much.
I would like to
And I know Richard's
understand.
worked hard on this. He deserves a lot of credit for it, because he's done a lot of hard work on it, trying to get the ball rolling. But look at it from my point of view, too.
Okay.
Yeah. We have,
Mike,
I would like to clear up one more point, very, very minor point. Has the city attorney reviewed the property and all the problem or all of the discussion that we've had? And do they have a problem?
And now that I can't answer. I think I've given all the information to everybody with the city. I don't know that the city attorney's been asked to look at it.
Well, somebody ought to get their opinion on it, and
Well, the single tax told me that what I needed to do was have a surveyor certify what the dimensions of the property were, and that's what I've done.
okay.
Right.
Very good.
Mike,
I don't have
Mike,
a problem with
the
it.
west
Sounds to me like they're
line
going to make an
that goes
improvement in the
north-south,
city.
the west
ma'am.
line seems to come very, very close to a trailer home.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we assure that there's going to be a
don't know, who did
buffer
this come
there
from?
that's
Is that
going to
yours?
protect the ownership of that home?
Yes, ma'am. There will
this
be
is mine. I know
the
what
landscape
this is.
buffer that be required for any piece of property in the city being next to those. They can't build right on top of them. And I know Richard is. Go ahead, Richard.
On the west boundary, because it's in the low spot of the property, we're going to have a 20-foot
Okay.
designation for detention ponds. In fact, we're going to have a retaining wall that's going to be 20 foot off the property, and then there'll be another retaining wall 15 feet or 5 feet from the property line, and that will be the stormwater detention basin there. And then there'll be a 5-foot buffer on the top side of that retaining wall that will be a vegetative buffer that will be around the circumference of the substation
Good,
site.
okay.
Okay, yeah, so, all right, so we'll open and close the public hearing if there's no one else that would like to speak for it. And we're here to vote just for the special exception only, so no additional
John,
information.
to answer your question as to why I was
Mr.
questioning
Chairman?
this.
Yes.
Because I've
Okay.
been around long enough
I-
to know that we've had many legal challenges
I
after
would
we've
make a
done
motion that
We're
we-
making a
the
motion,
project.
Richard. Dick?
Dick, we've got.
I would make a motion that we approve the special exception for the public utility at 621 Nichols Avenue.
I'll second that.
Roll call vote.
Schneider. Stankowski.
Aye.
Avent.
Aye.
Vera.
Aye,
Slagle.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any older new business?
Jesus, no.
We do not have a meeting next month.
Get out of here.
Hallelujah.
I'm making a
you guys got
motion
a
to
freebie.
adjourn.
So that'll count against you, Krista.
I so move.
Okay. All in
Stand.
favor for adjournment?
Aye.